Hello, so I normally review fragrances midweek and I thought I'd try something different today. So technically Avon are the world's biggest selling fragrance brand, I think because they have such a low price point and they have so many different fragrances on the market that I guess their unit sales must be very, very high. So Avon fragrances retail for as little as about £7 for 10ml or about £15 for 50ml. And you can go and try Avon fragrances in the UK at least in Superdrug stores, and you can also buy samples. So I bought 7 samples from the Far Away range for £4 including postage. So I think that's incredibly cheap. The one thing I will say about Avon fragrance samples though is that they come in a very annoying dabber bottles and they're very small volumes. So that's the only thing to watch out for. But if you do want to try some Avon fragrances, they are incredibly cheap to do so. So I thought I'd just walk you through the Far Away range. I feel like Far Away is quite a classic now. It's been on the market for quite a long time. So I'm going to rank these fragrances in my order of preference at the end of the video, but let's get on with this. This is my first impressions of the Avon Far Away line. So the first fragrance, Far Away, launched all the way back in time in 1994. So what's that, 32 years ago. And this fragrance just felt immediately very familiar to me. If you've smelt fragrances from around that time period, particularly peachy, floral, amber vanillas, this will immediately ring bells. This is a very perfumey perfume, but this is also quite a sweet fragrance. So really, initially I get something quite tropical feeling, but that sort of calms down quite quickly. And it turns into a floral, also fruity vanilla fragrance. So you particularly get the ylang-ylang, you particularly get the jasmine, and you get a peachiness and some powdery vanilla. And it's a very musky feeling fragrance overall. It's got a warmth to it, it's quite cosy, and it's quite enveloping as well. I thought this one actually lasted quite a long time on me. Was this particularly distinctive or different in any way? Not especially. But was it pleasant? Yes, I think this one is actually quite a nice fragrance. It does have a slightly 90s feel to it. I think some people might think this is a little bit old-fashioned feeling, but I don't think it's too out of the way really. This fragrance actually did make me think of other fragrances from the time period. So things like Jean-Paul Gaultier's Classique came to mind. It's not got that kind of incense hit that the Classique EDT used to have, but it definitely does have the powderiness, it has the florals, and it just has that kind of peachy colour feeling to it. I think this one, I can see why it spawned all these flankers. I can see why it's kept going over the years. I think it's a classic feeling fragrance and it's one of the best of the line, I think. So that's Far Away. So the next fragrance is the Glamour flanker, which was launched in 2019. So this is a fruity feeling blackcurrant dark purple version of Far Away. It has the powderiness still, it has the floral still, but they're much more background. There's something sort of soft about this one, but it's the blackcurrant that's the star initially, and it's quite a sweet feeling blackcurrant, quite syrupy. It gets much more vanilla-y in the dry down, more musky, and the fruit really fades back and it's replaced by some florals. So yeah, this is just a dark and fruity version of Far Away, and I think, you know, when I looked at the notes of this one, I was expecting something along the lines of Giorgio Armani C, something like that. And this is not that. I think the closest thing I've tried to this fragrance would be the original Roberto Cavalli fragrance. I think if you tone down the orange blossom in that fragrance and you added blackcurrant, this would be something along the same lines. So yes, I really like this one. This is called Glamour. So the next fragrance is called Beyond, and this one was launched in 2021. This seems to be the gourmand version of the Far Away line. So this one opens with some very bright feeling, very sweet feeling pear, and also something honeyed, something sweet there. Some florals and also some powderiness. So the powderiness, I think, is the cocoa. And initially it's not that noticeable, but when it dries down, it really does come to the forefront of this fragrance. It does smell very, very slightly chocolatey, but just generally more powdery and sweet. As this dries down too, there's a bit of a transformation. It goes from something that's not creamy to much more creamy, and there's also a deep feeling vanilla and perhaps even a patchouli here. I think that this does have a bit of a hit of something powdery and chocolatey about it, but definitely more cocoa than chocolate. I quite like this one. I could see this one being compared with classics like Loverdose Red Kiss. It does have a sort of similar feel to me to Red Kiss. I've also seen this one compared with Belle, and I don't immediately think of Belle with this fragrance, but clearly the timeline upon which this one was released does match with the release of Belle. So it's possible that this was intentioned as a bit of a dupe. So that's Beyond. The next fragrance was launched in 2023, and this one's called Beyond the Moon. So this is a dark feeling cherry initially. It's quite a syrupy feeling cherry, but there's also lots of honey here. I wouldn't say it's sticky. I would say it's more of a powdery texture. And to me, it makes me think of Night Blooming Jasmine. Night Blooming Jasmine always feels very powdery to me and very dense. And I think that's really amped up by lots of cashmere in this fragrance as well. There's also a bit of a spicy kick to this. And I think that really complements the Night Blooming Jasmine and just brings it out more. It makes it kind of exaggerated. The cherry really fades back into the dry down and you end up with a peppery, vanilla-laden cashmere. So this one really did make me think of the Carolina Herrera Good Girl kind of DNA. It has that powderiness, it has the sweetness, it has vanilla. And I think this also did make me think of other fragrances like Ghost Orb of Night. And it also made me think a little bit of Rochas Byzance because of that pepperiness, because of the cashmere. I think this one faded into a skin scent a little bit faster than the others, but I do think this one has a wide appeal. I think it's playing on quite a popular DNA. So yeah, that's Beyond the Moon. So the next fragrance is called Splendoria, and this one launched in 2023. And this one really shocked me because there's white oud listed in this fragrance. I can't say I smell anything overtly oudy here, but there is a richness to this fragrance and a sweetness to this fragrance. So this opens really with something quite dark and fruity, and it's very, very sweet and syrupy. It's almost like a liqueur initially. There's also a lot of florals in the background. The florals are smooth, white, and quite headachy almost. There's a bit of a shampoo-y feel to this as well. It's a bit soapy. I don't quite know what's left with the dry down. It's something sweet, but also shampoo-y, and I can't really tell you much more than that. I'm a bit lost with this one. I don't particularly like this fragrance, as you might be able to tell. I think this was perhaps the worst of the bunch for me. But if you like the notes that are listed, maybe check this one out. So that's Splendoria. So the next fragrance was launched in 2018, and this one's called Far Away Rebel. So this fragrance really opens with a very sweet, syrupy, almost like a lollipop or an iced lolly, berry fruitiness. It's a dark purple feeling fruitiness. There's also a powderiness, some vanilla and some white florals, and it's also just sickly sweet. So this one I've seen compared to Black Opium, and yes, I did think of Black Opium in the very beginning of the fragrance, but they diverge very quickly. I don't think this has a smoothness of Black Opium, and I also think it's much, much, much sweeter than Black Opium, but in a more kind of synthetic manner. I don't think this resembles anything particularly in nature. That's why I said that the fruits here made me think of ice pops, because it smells like an artificial flavouring kind of fruitiness rather than natural fruitiness. I think this one is just not for me again. So this one is Rebel. So the final fragrance is Shine, which was launched in 2024. So this fragrance initially made me think of Eden Sparkling Lychee. It opens with a very distinctive lychee. It's very pink feeling initially. So there's lychee, and then there's also a more powdery feeling raspberry. I really like the opening. It feels almost a little bit fizzy, and there's also like this cloudy floral feel in the background. The only floral that you sense towards the beginning is really a delicate pink rose, but there's just a general kind of floral sweetness in this fragrance as it dries down. As it dries down, you really lose the fruitiness, and that I think is a little bit less exciting for me. It's still powdery, it's still golden, there's lots of vanilla. It dries down to something more resembling the rest of the Far Away line. You know, the Far Away line is really all about a musky, powdery floral, and that's what you get with this one as well. But there is something very slightly fruity in the dry down of this too. Again, like the rest of this line, it's very sweet, this one. So yeah, that's Far Away Shine. So ranking these in my order of preference, number 7 would be Rebel. I think number 6 would be a toss-up between Splendoria and Shine. I think Splendoria probably takes number 6. Shine would be number 5. And then number 4 would be Beyond the Moon. I did like aspects of that, but for me the cashmere kills it slightly along with the black pepper. But if those elements of that fragrance don't bother you, that's actually quite a nice fragrance. I think number 3 would be the Classique Far Away. I think it's really inoffensive, but it is something that you've smelt over and over. Number 2 for me would be Beyond. I did like the creaminess, I did like the cocoa-y aspect of that, and it did feel quite retro, but I did like the fragrance. And then number 1 for me, hands down, would be Glamour. I just really like blackcurrant, and I think that's why I like that one. So in conclusion, with the Far Away line from Avon, I think really my top 3 or 4 are the ones that I would suggest if you are interested, you go and sniff. I don't think these fragrances smell expensive in the slightest, but they also don't smell like they cost £15. So I think they are worth trying, especially if you like that powdery musky vanilla that they all seem to have. So if you have enjoyed the video, then please do press the like button, and please also consider subscribing if you haven't done already. And please do let me know if you tried anything from the Far Away range or anything else from Avon, and what you think of the brand in general, because they don't just sell perfume, do they? They sell lots of other things. And thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.